And welcome back. My first guest is Carlos Martinez, the Executive Director of Bridges. Welcome, Carlos.
Welcome. Thank you for having me, George.
So very, very happy to have you on the show, Carlos. And Bridges obviously is a place that's close to my heart. I spent 5 years there as the Executive Director, and wonderful time before I became the town supervisor. And so I'm well acquainted with Bridges. It was formerly known as RILC, Rockland Independent Living Center, and it really is the preeminent advocacy agency within Rockland County for people with disabilities. So it's a great organization, and I know you're going to give our viewers an awful lot of information on how Bridges helps people within the community and how they highlight issues that are important to folks with disabilities in particular. Before we get into that, though, let's talk a little bit about yourself. So maybe you could tell our viewers a little bit about who you are, where you where you were born, how long you've been living in the area, and just a little bit of your personal background.
Yeah, that's always a challenge when I have to talk about myself, so I'll keep it brief. Yeah, I'm actually a Puerto Rican native, born in Puerto Rico, raised in the Bronx, New York, with a family.
What part of the Bronx?
Sure, the South Bronx, actually, near Hunts Point, an area that's very familiar to me. Family raised in very critical situations. It was a situation where my mom ran away from home early on, and she sort of had to make a way in the Bronx and make a new life for herself. And despite the circumstances, she kind of pushed through, and I'm really proud of where my family's at, and the amends that were sort of made, with family in Puerto Rico to make sure that we can connect and rekindle that relationship. So we've come a long way, and from a situation where we were in welfare to a more independent lifestyle. My mom is an important employee at one of the major distributors of wholesale food and products in New York, and she loves it. And so my family's doing well. I'm one of 6 children, so I'm the oldest of 6. So it's a pretty amazing way when you look back and see where you came from and where you are now.
So where'd you end up going to school? And I know you have several degrees. So
yeah, so I ended up coming to Rockland in 2004 to Nyack College to get my bachelor's in social work. From there, I actually ended up meeting my wife, and we got married soon after we graduated, and ended up getting my master's a few years later at Fordham University. Before that, we had 2 beautiful children. My son is Caleb, 7 years old, and my daughter Ariella, who's 3. And we live in Nanuet. We're here in Rockland. We've been in Rockland for a while. We took a hiatus for 2 years to try Monroe, and we didn't like it, so we came back.
You're a smart man.
And we love it. We love it in Rockland. So.
And you're actually living in Nanuet. You're actually living in Clarkstown. So I'm very proud that we have yet another executive director of a very important agency, living here in our town and providing such great services within the town. Let's talk just globally. What does Bridges do? What's the main philosophy or mission of Bridges, and what are some of the main programs?
Sure, that's a great question. It's one that we get a lot in the community. George, you mentioned you being there, and you absolutely raised the status of the organization, and it takes years and time, I guess, for people to figure out what an organization like ours do, and sometimes the easy way is to associate as a disability organization. But I'd like to clarify and talk about the grassroots movement that started this, all this back years ago, over 30, almost 40 years ago, when the organizations, when people with disabilities themselves decided that there was problems systemically that needed to change to enhance quality of life, to improve access. So this grassroots movement was the beginning of what we now call independent living centers throughout the state. Bridges, also known as Rockland Independent Living Center, is one of over 40 in New York State independent living centers, and one of over 400 in the nation. And our role is advocacy, it's education, it's support, it's empowerment to ensure that people with disabilities' lives are improved by simple measures of access in sometimes a society or community where people still live in a time frame where the able-bodied have more opportunities. And we want to change that because, in very simple terms, disability is a natural part of our human existence. And it's almost imperative and almost incumbent upon us to create a community that's a little bit more accessible, that takes measures in ensuring that employment opportunities, educational opportunities, physical barriers are removed to allow people with disabilities to access those same opportunities that anyone else could. One person I want to highlight is Judy Heumann, who said, my disability doesn't handicap me, society does. Very important thing to understand, because people today embrace their disability, whatever the case may be, because they have to make a transition in life and make sure that they don't end up in a place where they're depressed and sort of thinking that life is at its end, when really it's just beginning. And society, our community, our physical structures can change to enhance that access to opportunity so that people, regardless of disability, can have opportunities alike.
Right. So, and I will tell you that in my experience here, certainly as the supervisor of the town of Clarkstown, now going into I'm in my fourth year, second term and fourth year in office, we'll frequently refer people over to Bridges, and Bridges really is kind of that agency that kind of will help people navigate the service delivery system, kind of fills in the gaps. You've got some really very important programs. You have a program for veterans, the Dwyer program. You have a program for essentially a home care program where people manage their own care, the consumer-directed personal assistant program. You also have now the CHORE program that kind of works with seniors that you guys have kind of brought over, and you also have the program for reentry, where folks that are coming in from the criminal justice system. Why don't we kind of go through those major programs, and you could speak a little bit about each one and how people can kind of get involved.
Sure. Yeah, and I kind of mentioned it already, but our identity is our independent living services, where we provide advocacy both systemically and for individuals. When there's an instance of blatant discrimination or maybe a barrier to service or barrier to education or employment, we're there to step in to provide non-punitive approach to educating and providing a service to the community to help and embrace and enhance the opportunity that one is looking for. So if it's employment, we look at the employer and say, hey, here's a way that you can reasonably accommodate this individual, and this is why it's important for you to do that. So that's our independent living services. Simple things like information and referral, where people with disabilities or families or members of the community, employers, will call us and say, hey, I want to look at maybe making my site a little more accessible. How do I do that? That's what we're there for. Right. Providing navigation to healthcare, health insurance, and other health resources is a big part of what we do. Benefits advisement for people who have Medicare, SSI, Social Security disability income, and Medicaid are some of the things that we do for the community. That's our major and our biggest identity in the organization. Our second, one of the second programs, and our largest actually, is the one you mentioned, the Consumer-Directed Personal Assistance Program. It's a model that blends so well with the independent living movement that allows people with disabilities who are capable of managing their care to direct and control the way they receive their care. It allows them, I'll give you a plain example. If my mother had a disability and she had Medicaid, she could hire myself, she can hire a friend, she can hire someone she trusts to help her at home with her care. And why the program works is because oftentimes family members are already caring for a loved one. Sometimes they're even losing income for it. And this program affords them the opportunity to be paid for something they're doing to support a loved one. And that's where this program, CDPA, Consumer Directed Personal Assistance, really helps the community. In fact, there's even financial rewards in the sense that it really does save money at state and federal levels because the program is actually a little bit more affordable to run in comparison to its counterparts, licensed home care and even nursing home institutionalization. And then you mentioned some of the other key programs, people with disabilities who are veterans. We support them and provide peer mentoring, transportation services to and from Rockland to Castle Point and Montrose. We support people with disabilities who were involved or are involved in the justice system.
Well, let's talk about the Veterans Program. Because,
absolutely.
That's an issue, and that's a group that's really, I think it's important for us to kind of focus on just briefly. I mean, here in the town, one of the things that I'm very proud of, since I've been supervisor, that we've really looked to do a number of things to try and elevate and put a focus on veterans. And simple ways in which we can do it. So we started this Veterans Banner Program, which adorns all of our downtown areas. And
I love that,
and we were the first in Rockland to do it. Several other towns have followed suit. And so in the downtown areas, there are these wonderful banners that actually show pictures of vets, photos of vets with their years of service. And we have one senior citizen who actually did a banner for her father, who was a World War I vet.
Wow.
And she did a banner for her husband, who was a World War II vet.
Yeah.
And so we've had well over 200 banners that have been done in a couple of years since we started that program. They're up and down all of our downtown areas: New City, West Nyack, Bardonia, Valley Cottage, Congers, and really delighted that we've done that. Also on this show, I mean, immediately after you, there'll be a veterans segment with a Desert War veteran, Jaime Soto, who will be on this program. So this is our 41st episode. It's hard to believe, but 41st episode in just as I'm starting my 4th year as supervisor. So we do about a dozen a year, I guess, 15 a year, and the great part of it is that out of all of these episodes that we've done, every single one of them has a veteran on it.
Yeah.
And now what's kind of happening is, and we're repackaging some of those to just have a veterans piece, where we're doing just separate shows about our veterans. There's a number of those vets, unfortunately, that passed away. Yeah. Like Frankie Morea was one. Jerry Dinellen was another. And so now that becomes like a little bit of a living history that that can kind of tell a little bit of the story of our vets. But the Dwyer program was actually started in New York State by a former state senator, now U.S. congressman from Long Island, Lee Zeldin, who happened to be a U.S. Army veteran as well, and combat veteran. And Congressman Zeldin, when he was a senator, got the funding for this program. And what he recognized is that veterans are more likely to speak to another vet than they are to speaking to somebody else. And because there's that commonality and that shared experience or bond. And what I think has been unique about the Dwyer program is that program has really been able to connect vets across generations. And that's really helped some of the vets really talk about things that they never really processed. So
and I will mention that Joseph P. Dwyer is one of the veterans who came back from a situation having seen and done what many military servicemen do for the country, and there wasn't treatment or support for him, an opportunity for him to really talk through some of the things that he was going through, and unfortunately took his life at a very serious, critical point in his life. We remember that situation because he took care of others as a medic serviceman, and the system honestly failed him in supporting him and providing him the support he needed. And what the Dwyer program does is, as you mentioned, and something that's very valuable to the independent living movement, is this peer perspective, allowing veterans to help other veterans that are willing and able to sort of be that mentor to other veterans who are going through situations that are dire. There's a high rate of suicide among veterans, and depression and PTSD and TBI, things that traumatic brain injury, things that need the support from other people, and the best people to do it are other veterans.
Right.
And it's a model we take very wholeheartedly throughout all the other programs in the organization, and specifically in the Veterans Program.
Well, I know we could spend hours talking about your services because they're just so important. You have the reentry program that helps people come back into the community, but we're just about out of time. So what I'd like to do is just, you have a number of upcoming events. I know as we're filming this, and this will air, this should air briefly before one of your events, and then also will be repeated after one of your upcoming events. Maybe you could speak about a couple of your upcoming events.
Absolutely. We're actually really excited to have our annual fundraiser dinner coming up in March, beginning part of March. And we're really excited to be honoring two people, Kevin McCahill, who's the Assistant Superintendent of the Nanuet School District, and the Nanuet Student Services Program there, that have done a great deal of work to integrate education both for students with and without disabilities. It's amazing to watch, and there's actually a really cool surprise. So if people make it out, they'll actually be able to see a video that we'll have to share to the entire community. So I'm looking forward to that. Second person is Jill Warner, who I've seen in your segments here before. Jill Warner is a pioneer, a person that has fought for the rights of people with disabilities for so many years, has really done her job in helping to enhance quality of life, and she just deserves this recognition, and I'm excited to honor her as well. And so our event is around those preconceived notions that has to do with people with disabilities. When a person thinks about the word disability, there's a preconceived notion, and we want to address that and be able to help the community sort of begin to see what life is like, and hopefully improve the way that we respond and appreciate one another in this world.
And so you also look for volunteers. So how can somebody get in touch with you, and how can somebody volunteer, either to be a peer mentor, to be a caregiver, or frankly also to be somebody who could volunteer with your food pantry or help with some of the seniors of the CHOR program. So how do they get in touch with you, and how do they volunteer?
Absolutely. So for a list of our services, events that are coming up, and to volunteer, you can visit our page, www.bridgesrc.org. You can call us at 845-624-1366, and someone will be able to help you. And you'll get information on volunteering, information on our services, and information on our events coming up this year. I'm excited.
Well, Carlos, I want to thank you. We're out of time now, but I want to thank you for your leadership within this field. I want to thank you for being such a wonderful guest, and it's great to see Bridges really thriving under your leadership now in your first year as Executive Director.
Thank you, George. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And coming up will be U.S. Army veteran Jaime Sosa, who's a Desert War veteran. Stay tuned.